Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz, and this season we will be unpacking real trends, hot topics in the workplace around allyship and inclusion. Our goal is that each week you leave with tangible tools, information, practical strategies that you can take back to allies at your organization. Let's dig in to this week's topic. Hello, listeners. So excited. We have a fantastic guest this week. Jennifer Schwab Wangers is the founder and CEO of Entity Academy, with one goal in mind: to support and empower diverse talent through education and mentorship. Her driving force in founding Entity was her lack of female mentors in her 20s, leaving her to learn solely through trial and error. Despite this, she was able to build a successful career, which motivated her to pay it forward with the next generation of leaders by providing support early in their career trajectories. After leaving her job as a tax consultant at Ernst & Young to pursue her passions and co-founding Sierra Club Green Home, a preeminent sustainable lifestyle website, Jennifer launched Entity Academy in 2016. Since then, she's built the company to be the first ever upskilling marketplace for diverse talent professionals, dedicated to educating and helping them navigate the 21st century job market so they can launch careers with high earning potential and advancement opportunities. Welcome, Jennifer, to the show.
Thanks so much, Julie. I appreciate you taking on this subject matter.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you paying it forward. Young people, they deserve more support and scaffolding than you and I got in our careers. I can relate a lot to your story. So let's start there. You have a successful corporate career. You successfully start a business. Then what caused you to pivot in 2016 with Entity?
So 2016, we launched the business, and really the concept originally was mentorship. It meets education, meets media. And it was all three of those pillars that allowed us to really create something unique in the marketplace. And we were totally focused on educating women. And the impetus of me starting the business was I did not have mentors early on in my career. And one thing that happens in corporate America is you often don't get mentors until you're much further along and you've already proven yourself. And I think those early years when you're really you're going through the motions and you're trying to figure out, like, how do I make my mark here? What is my real career trajectory? You need mentors the most. And so the driving force in starting Entity was, I think women need mentors early on to decide, is this a paycheck or is this a career path? And that was what drove me to start this business. So originally, we were completely focused on upskilling women into tech careers, so digital marketing, cybersecurity, software development, and data science. Over the last year and a half, we have been also entering the corporate market and providing soft skills training to employees. And so that's been a real interesting change in the business. But now we do have a business to consumer revenue stream as well as business to business.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, I can see how organizations would want to support it, but individuals might realize the need to upskill early on as well. So, speaking of which, I think everyone's wondering about how we're going to upskill the workforce so quickly. Higher ed is super out of reach, depending on your socioeconomic background. We know we've got the baby boomers retiring and the labor shortages are forecasted to continue for quite some time. We're going to need to get more out of people, and it seems like we need to train people on how to be more productive and produce more than in the past. We could just add people. So I'm wondering, Jennifer, what do you see as the big upskilling trends?
Sure. Well, the World Economic Forum really highlighted that there's 10 major skills gaps, and 9 of them are soft skills in nature. So with the advent of AI being much more mainstream in the workplace, those soft skills are all the more important. So collaboration, managing up and down, creativity, time management, problem solving. It's going to be, and these are the things that we're teaching in our programs, especially as we have reached into corporate America as well as government. And I think soft skills training is one of the biggest things we can do to ready the workforce for this next huge transformation with artificial intelligence that is underway right now.
Yeah, and speaking to the trend of folks without advanced degrees being the biggest opportunity to really upskill, thinking about the most underserved parts of our populations really need those skills the most. And as a society, we're going to benefit the most from upskilling those folks. I just wonder what are some of the barriers for folks that may not have access to traditional higher ed that was, in the past a lot more affordable and achievable. W- Why is focusing on that segment so important?
Yeah, that segment is actually the segment of society that needs upskilling the most because many of these jobs that uh, are going to likely go away in the next decade are held by people that don't have secondary education. So they have not attended a traditional bachelor's degree program. They have high school diplomas and GEDs, but that is really only enabled the majority of that population to enter wage work type roles. So retail associates, customer service reps, waiters, waitresses, uh, think of it as like frontline workers. And they have to get a new skill set to be relevant in this next iteration of the economy. So here we are. That population for a business like entity is also very scalable, but there's a number of risk factors that come into play, such as since they haven't gone through formal secondary education programs, uh, like there's a lot of completion risk when they're going through a certificate program like ours. In addition to completion risk, there's often placement risk. So helping them secure a job can also be challenging. And this goes back to effective time management, showing up to the interviews and being ready to talk about your background comfortably and show that you can hit the ground running in a corporate atmosphere. So there's some additional placement risk for the population that doesn't have bachelor's degrees. And then of course, there's also employers that they're still looking at that rite of passage on your resume to indicate that you're going to be a suitable hire, and they're looking to see that you have a bachelor's degree. So there's also some
Mhm.
implicit bias on that particular
Mhm.
candidate to start with. So placement risk is a thing. And then on the backside, if you have a student that goes through our programs and drops halfway or drops throughout the program, we have to go and collect for the portion of tuition that they used in our program. And there's a lot of collections risk as well.
Mm, yeah.
So, where the rubber meets the road is somebody's got to upskill that population. Private
Hmm.
companies such as ours, it may be too risky for us to take that on at scale. It
Hmm.
actually is. And
Yeah.
so, where's that leave us? The
Yeah.
government.
Who's able to do that? Yeah, the
Who's
government.
able to do it at such scale? Because 65% of the country does not have a bachelor's degree. And
Yeah.
I think that we often overlook the magnitude of that stat because if you are if you do have a bachelor's degree and a lot of people have masters and PhDs, you're in a bit of a bubble and you don't realize, wow, the majority of the population does not have a bachelor's degree.
And
And
there's
so
shame. There's shame associated with
there
that
is, and
too.
there really shouldn't be because employers that are willing to access those talent pools that don't have bachelor's degrees open themselves up to like more diversity candidates. They open up to other trains of thought that could be really valuable for those businesses, like diversity of thought. And so we
Mhm.
are seeing employers really starting to um, eliminate that on their job descriptions as a baseline requirement. However, they still have to get through HR. They still have to get through the hiring manager to get the job.
Yep.
And that's where we're seeing a number of hurdles still.
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah,
corporation
that
at
implicit
large
bias.
could say, hey, we're now opening our doors to people that don't have bachelor's degrees, but in practice, there's still much to be desired.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting, Jennifer. Yeah, I can relate to a lot of those risk factors, like you said, completion risk, placement risk, the college degree risk, your collection risk. Like that's a lot of risk and why we don't have a great solution right now to this problem. If I'm thinking about my own background selfishly as you were sharing that story, I remember working my way through college at a call center and, I was one of the first college graduates in my family. And so my parents didn't know how to guide me. You kind of had to like figure it all out on your own. But as much as I detested that job, oh my gosh, it was a terrible job. But they helped me with my college education. So I graduated with very few loans. And I knew what it was like corporate speak. You kind of learn the lingo because you go to enough
Mhm.
meetings and town halls and see the reports and you have your email. So by the time I went to interview for like my first real big girl job, I knew how to talk to these people. Because I've been
You knew the
around for
ropes.
5 years, but I remember thinking how weird it was, like the corporate speak and the acronyms and the just the kind of facade of it all. So I can empathize with first-time college students or people that, like you said, get into the service industries, work frontline work because that's what their parents did and that's what their community around them does. It's like, how do we break this cycle? It's like a sticky floor that we're stuck to because people need support. They need mentors, like you said earlier. They need people that believe in them. They need people that can explain the strange things that happen to them, some place to safely ask
Absolutely.
your questions. And
Yeah.
I think what's happening is corporate's like, oh no, they're just so quick to dismiss it. Like they're not professional, they're not qualified. And it's like, what? Like, what if we took a chance? Like, what if they were? Like, what if, like you said, they need upskill, they need to learn what they don't even know what they don't know. So I just wonder, like, corporate resistance to this. You mentioned implicit bias, but companies they have more jobs available than they can fill. Like, why aren't they doing this?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I also believe that some of the risk factors that we've encountered with upskilling a population without bachelor's degrees could also be an issue within corporate. So completion risk, showing up,
Right.
getting used to a structured environment where you have to be in at a certain time. You
Mhm.
can't have a lot of personal conflicts. You have to be there
Committed,
focused on the job at
committed.
hand. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a societal issue. And there's no great answer. But we have to upskill that population, and it really probably should fall at the hands of the US government, which i.e. is financial aid and Pell
Hmm.
Grants. And
Right.
so we're back into that same conversation that we've had for so many years about the efficacy of financial aid and does it truly serve the student to walk away with all this debt?
Hmm.
Um, and those types of loans actually have low interest rates. Now, I think there's been a lot of challenges for students that haven't been employed or haven't been employed in a job that can provide some discretionary income to help them pay them down. And something's got to be done to address that. But before we start forgiving loans en masse, we really need to have some of the onus fall on the student to
Right.
make sure they're showing up, they're bringing their A game, they're utilizing those funds wisely that are coming from the
Right.
taxpayers.
Yeah.
There's been no discussion of that. And
Right.
I
It's kind
know
of just like this
firsthand,
blanket solution, like, okay, we're not going to
right,
solve it proactively, so reactively just wipe it clean,
wipe
regardless
it
of like you
clean.
said.
And
Like,
it's a big line item for the
right,
taxpayers.
right.
And when you look at our our conundrum of, many of the students that are getting their loans forgiven, they are in a financially challenging situation. But then you also have the students that in good faith, like lived at home after college or took on 2, 3 jobs to pay them down, and they get no relief because they sacrifice to
They
pay
played by
them
the
to pay them
rules that they
off.
thought they were supposed to do. And
Right. And then you stick the taxpayer with the bill. Okay. So there's just so many facets of this that need deeper research, and they need a more nuanced solution than just let's forgive, this group of student borrowers, let's not forgive these. It just feels very patchworky. And then, challenges that we have is, where are the metrics for the student that say, okay, the student did everything they could to attend class, to make sure that they're doing their homework, that they're learning the skills, they're being proactive in the job market. Where are those metrics before saying, okay, we're just going to forgive your loan because you haven't been able to pay it back? There's no onus on the student, and there's no metrics to really gauge whether or not their loan should be forgiven. And I think that that's one of the main issues I take with the Biden administration's initiative to forgive loans at that scale.
It kind of reminds me of the conversation in the DEI space around equity versus equality. It seems like we're kind of doing an equality blanket approach. We'll treat everybody the same, forgive the same amount, regardless of your financial position and your, academic record, like you said. An equitable approach would be looking at some criteria to see who needs the support the most and giving people that have proven themselves performance-wise, that have the greatest financial need, which is, kind of like what we were doing back in the early 2000s when I went to college. I got Pell Grants, I got scholarships or needs-based and merit-based. Like, it feels like we had this figured out and we've like gone the other direction. And, the inflation rate is nowhere near what college tuition price increases have been. And so,
Right.
as I have friends that are now having kids that are entering college, like, we had like $10,000 a year or something all in, and now it's like 100. And like my friends are like, I guess my kid's not going to college. That's the
Well,
reality.
and that is like probably a future trend, is like,
Like they're just not going. Like
is there
it's
enough
not
of an
possible.
ROI on attending college given how expensive it is now?
Yeah.
And do I want to take out those types of loans?
Yeah.
But with all that said, like I think you alluded to it, we're moving away from meritocracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. At the very time we need these skills, we're not proactively funding them. And one gripe I have personally is just, I really do feel like as a country in the United States, one of our deepest competitive advantages is our education system. We have people that come from all over the world to get degrees and advanced degrees here. We have produce like the best research. It's just, it seems like an opportunity for us as a country to really double down on that competitive advantage, not shy away from it and make it only possible for the elite. And so I don't know. I don't think we can solve the world's problems here today, Jennifer. Did.
Why not?
I
Why
wish.
not?
I wish. If you did, I always like this question though. If you had a magic wand, like if there was one thing you wish could change in this system, what would you change?
Give me 1 second to think on that. That's a big question.
Oh, I know. And I mean, I could come up with 20, so I get it.
Yeah, I think that we have a major obligation and opportunity to remain competitive. And I would move us back to a more meritocracy like environment. across the board. And that it still needs to address diversity, equality, inclusion, but we have to look at things objectively. It's almost like doing away with the free press. As soon as we move off the dime of objectivity, something is lost in our society that we can never get back.
Yeah. 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 Objectively, I mean, having objective criteria, I think you make a good case for that. What specifically would you hope was used to evaluate things? You mentioned academic performance and financial need. Are
Mhm.
there other things that need to be addressed?
Sure. I think attendance records of did a student actually attend class, grades, of course. Uh, did they show up for interviews? I think career placement offices need to be well staffed and resourced. That's
Mhm.
probably something that's completely overlooked on most college campuses. You'll have like two people in
Yeah.
the resume and in the career department for like 40,000 students. That's not going to make a dent. We had a whole team when we were putting thousands of people through our programs, and the education and career concierge, like that is a thing, and it needs to be built out significantly, and it almost needs to be treated like a tenured position,
Mhm. Right.
because those relationships with employers, they're everything.
Yep.
um, However, I do think there needs to be a system, sort of like a data report on the students' participation in achieving their goals that
Hmm.
are tied back to taking the
Yeah.
loans.
Yeah.
And if they did not do their part, the loans absolutely should not be forgiven
Hmm.
for whatever reason, because you shouldn't take the money if you don't have the capability of getting through a program, showing up for interviews, producing a proper resume, and then entering the workforce. That is the goal of tuition,
Hmm.
providing loans of
Well,
any
you had to do
sort.
your part. There's an
You have
exchange
to do
of
your part, and
services.
it needs to be bidirectional.
Yeah. Accountability.
Bidirectional between the school and the students.
Yeah.
And
I,
if we could gauge that through a set of metrics, and
yeah.
with today's big data should not be that difficult, then we can determine truly who did their part in full and still didn't get a
Yep.
job, or still did not have the ability to pay back. Okay, those should be forgiven.
Yeah.
But if the student do their part and then they say, well, I didn't get a job, or but I didn't also go to class.
Yeah.
There's no bidirectional accountability in
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah. Bidirectional accountability. And there's an expectation and there's a goal set. And if you met those goals, that's not a you problem, it's a system problem, but there could be an individual problem and commitment problem too that
Correct.
people need to be held accountable for. Yeah, I had a family member that I will not name that started college. And I kind of knew like this family member. I was like, this is not, you're not an academic person. You're not sure what you want to do. Like, all right, let's see. Yeah, the first semester, that was it, right? So then the loans
No
start
done.
kicking in. Yeah. And they had the tall order of making some significant loan payments over the course of a year for a
Yeah.
semester of education they didn't even really partake in. And I was kind of like, hey, that's karma. That's kind of like on you because you didn't
Took
take it
on the money.
seriously.
You have to be committed, and you should not take those funds without the
Right,
commitment.
right.
And I think that's also the challenge is, some of the funding from like the Pell Grants, do we, is it being used for the right
Hmm.
purposes that drive the end goal towards finishing the education?
Right.
There's a lot of examples where it's not being used towards
Hmm.
their educational goals, and that and the taxpayer should not be on the hook for that.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting stuff. And it's not significant. I remember my Pell Grants covered like half, and now it's like like it doesn't cover very much at all. Like the
It
amount
doesn't. It doesn't.
it's like,
And this concept of it's like free money.
yeah,
The psychology of the borrower has to change as
yeah.
well.
You don't even appreciate it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so interesting, Jennifer, the work that you do, and so important that we're upskilling people and thinking outside of the, 4-year bachelor's degree track. Like you said, there's just not going to be as much of that. There's a lot of people that don't have that already, but the pipeline of folks with that type of expertise, or not even expertise with experience, is just going to be less in the future. And so upskilling people from where they're at and looking for other ways to upskill is critical, in addition to some of these systemic problems you brought up. So thankful for the work you do. Would you tell our
You
listeners how they can follow your work? Best way to stay in touch?
absolutely. So we can be followed both through Instagram and Facebook. It's at Entity Mag. It's the media arm of our business. And we can also be found at entityacademy.com. And then we have a whole content site around like mentorship and compelling content for our target audience at entitymag.com. So entityacademy.com and entitymag.com, as well as at entitymag on Instagram and Facebook.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Diversity Pivot podcast.
Absolutely.
For listening to the Diversity Pivot podcast. My hope is that you walked away with a tangible tool, insight, or information that you can share with other allies on the journey. If you liked this week's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a tremendous amount to us. We'll be back next week with another hot topic.